Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rita. I'm now going to present my RR topic, Is Sex Work Misunderstood? Sex work should be legalized or decriminalized in Taiwan. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will go through the introduction first, which I will start by an attention gather. Then I will explain some context about this topic and state the thesis statement. And the second part is the body. I will introduce you the law about sex work in Taiwan, followed up by the drawbacks that legalization and decriminalization of sex work might bring. And then next, I will talk about why sex work should be legalized or decriminalized in terms of health, safety, and morality. And then finally, I will end the presentation by restating my thesis statement and making a suggestion. Okay, so let's dive into the introduction first. There are plenty of reasons that make people step into the sexual industry. Some of them might be attracted by the huge amount of money that they won't be able to earn from doing a normal job. Some of them might do sex work basically because they have no other professional skill for a living, while others are being forced by poverty. However, no matter what the reason is, whether sex work should be a legal activity has remained one of the most controversial topics until today. The thesis statement of my presentation is Taiwan should legalize sex work rather than banning it due to the reason of health, safety, and morality and personal freedom. But before getting into the real topic, it's important to know the differences between the term prostitution and sex work. The language that is being used here is considered important because the meaning behind these two terms is not only different but will also affect people's perception and impression towards the industry. According to Kate Lister, the word prostitute originally came from the classical Latin as a verb in 1530 that carries a meaning of sexually dishonoring yourself. Therefore, the term doesn't just indicate selling sexual services as a job. Rather, the deeper and more negative meaning it carries will lead people to think that the world's oldest profession is infamous and dishonorable. And then, furthermore, according to Understanding Sex Work in an Open Society, the term sex worker recognizes that sex work is a work. Prostitution, on the other hand, has the meaning of criminality and immorality. Therefore, sex workers would prefer to be called sex worker rather than prostitutes. Also, sex work contains a broader meaning. Lister suggests that prostitution is a term that is too narrow to explain the variety of sexual industry that includes jobs other than selling sexual services for money. Sex workers, on the other hand, generally refers to people whose work is related to sex. But the kind of sex worker I'm referring here is the kind of job that people will sell sex services or do sexual intercourse in exchange for economic benefits. Next, let's take a look at the three different types of frameworks that are used to regulate sex work. According to Alexandra Lutnick and Deborah Cohen, some countries criminalize sex work, which means that they see the purchase or selling of any kinds of sexual activities as a crime. Sex workers therefore will get punishment for selling sex services. Some countries decriminalize sex work, which means that sex workers are treated equally like any other individual, and the laws that regulate other businesses also regulate sex workers. Still other countries have legalized sex work. These countries make particular rules for sex workers to follow. Taiwan has criminalized sex work for years, and now let's take a closer look at the law in Taiwan. Jonathan Adams notes that since the 1990s, prostitutes have been punished under the Social Order Maintenance Act. Pimps, middlemen, and traffickers are dealt with under the criminal code, slapped with up to 5 years in jail or 3,300 fines. Johns aren't penalized at all. Johns refer to the so-called sex buyers. However, the law that only penalizing sex workers was later found unconstitutional. Therefore, after the constitutional interpretation was given, the law was changed. Since 2011, both the sex workers and the sex buyers and also the middleman will all be punished of either receiving fine or being taken into custody if the sexual intercourse is taken place outside the legal sex zone, which is also called the red light district set by the government according to the Social Order Maintenance Act. However, until today, the special zones that people are allowed to engage in sex trade don't exist anywhere in Taiwan. Therefore, in other words, sex work in Taiwan still remains to be illegal. There are certain reasons why the majority of the countries are unwilling to legalize sex work. If we look from the perspective of the society, morality is one of the biggest concerns behind the issue. Anne-Marie Foistier notes in her article that the underlying reason people disagree with legalizing prostitution is that prostitution is viewed as immoral because it involves women selling their bodies for financial gain. It's certain to say that the mainstream of society doesn't think using one's body to make money or make a living is morally tolerable. Also, the problem of health and safety is another concern. Some people argue that the rate of venereal disease and crime will increase if sex work is legalized. On the other hand, if we stand from the perspective of the sex workers, tax paying is something they do not want to face with. According to Deborah and Lutnick, the majority of women who are working in the sex industries do not want to pay taxes. However, if sex work is officially regarded as a work, they would have to pay taxes. Another thing that sex workers would have to face when sex work is legalized is the lack of freedom. Lutnick and Cohen again state that sex workers will lose the freedom of working in the way they want, but will have to be regulated by the authority once sex work is legalized, which is something that they are not expecting for sure. However, if health, morality, and safety and personal freedom are taken into account, sex work should be either legalized or decriminalized in Taiwan. Legalization or decriminalization of sex work could effectively help ensure sex workers' health and therefore reduce the rate of sexual transmitted disease. The first factor is about the use of condom. According to the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, quote, the possession of condoms may be used as circumstantial evidence of intent to commit prostitution. Therefore, this may lead sex workers to avoid carrying condoms due to the fear that they will be used as evidence in a court of law. It's a common knowledge that sex without condoms could be dangerous because it may cause the risk of getting sexual transmitted disease, which is also called STDs. If sex work isn't seen as a crime, then sex workers wouldn't have to be afraid of carrying condoms. Moreover, regular health checks will be provided if sex work is considered a job officially. In Taiwan, there is a law that says the employers have to provide the employees health check when they're at work, which is the employee's right protected by law. Therefore, we can expect that the Taiwanese government might also set laws that requires sex workers to do regular health checks. What's more, Barbara Youngdorf suggests in her article that if the fee of getting care for venereal disease wasn't afforded by the government, the sex workers are less likely to get the treatment when they are infected. Upon knowing that if the government doesn't set law for requiring sex workers to do regular health check or helping them to afford the fee of getting health care, the rate of getting STD wouldn't decline. Safety is another crucial factor that makes legalization or decriminalization of sex work an immediate priority of the government. First, it effectively helps reducing violence. Sex workers are chronically exposed under the risk of violence due to their working environment. However, according to Sweetman, repressive policy approaches exacerbate the dangers that sex workers are subject to through including measures such as making brothel keeping illegal and discouraging and discouraging engagement with the police. Not only will legalizing prostitution be helpful for reducing violence, but it will also reduce the rape rate. According to Ann Gunderson, the reported rape incidents have decreased during the time when indoor prostitution was legalized due to the fact that the sex workers are able to negotiate the price under the protection of the law. Moral concerns are the core of this debate. Most people don't want sex work to become a legal activity because they think that selling their bodies as sexual items for financial gain is immoral. However, people do have rights and freedom to do things they want as long as they are not hurting anyone. Also, based on the concept of sexual liberation, doing sex work for money should not be banned just because others think it is an unacceptable and infamous job. As for the morality of this issue, we can think it of these ways. People who sell sex for money are not the only group of people who do activities related to sex to earn money. There are other jobs like porn stars, phone sex workers, strippers, and etc. Then why is selling sexual services illegal when there are plenty of other jobs out there that are related to sex? Also, if sex workers are interpreted as people who satisfy the sexual desire of their clients, just like people who sell food are satisfying the appetite of their customers, then if you think in this way, why is selling sexual services immoral? In conclusion, sex work should be legalized or decriminalized in Taiwan if health, safety, and morality and personal liberty are taken into consideration. And the government should really understand the immediate needs of sex workers and come up with laws that most satisfy their needs and protect their rights. And this is my works cited page. Thank you for listening.